All right, welcome back. This is the Something Measured podcast. I am Kent Lindstrom. I am your host. My guest today is Miyoko Schinner.
That's right.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Good. Thank you so much for being here. Miyoko is the founder and CEO of Miyoko's, which is tomorrow's creamery. She has also been a best-selling author, chef, has run a restaurant, been a TV show host, has raised a bunch of venture capital, and is running a company of more than 100 people.
That's right.
So welcome.
Yeah, well, thank you.
So we'd love to hear a bit about, I've had, coincidentally, the focus of my podcast isn't necessarily veganism, but I've actually had someone who runs a vegan pet food company on as well. So
Oh, really? Okay.
I would love to hear about Miyoko's and what the business is doing.
Sure. Miyoko's is a company that's trying to revolutionize dairy, making butter and cheese and other creamery products from plants instead of animals.
And one of the amazing things when people tell me about it, it used to be that when people told me, oh, I'm a vegan, and they have the reasons for it and all that. And they're like, it was mostly about the reasons. It wasn't necessarily about the food. Now, when people try your products, they seem to say, like, you've got to try this thing. It's amazing.
Yeah, because it tastes better than the animal counterpart.
Right. And so they don't even get to like why
That's right.
what their story is, which I find kind of fascinating.
Yeah, I think it's really important that, we make decisions with our taste buds. It doesn't matter how much you try to reason with people. Ultimately, if it doesn't taste good, they're not going to eat it. And, we've been indoctrinated culturally to like certain foods. And it's really important if we're trying to create foods that are going to impact the future of the planet or animals or human health, that we've got to make them taste familiar and delicious.
I think, I wonder in Silicon Valley and around the world, if this isn't, it seems to me, tell me what you think, that there's a lot of sort of non-militant meat eaters, meaning they eat meat and they're not going to switch to like a bean burger from meat or cheese. But if it tastes just as good and if it doesn't cost more, then they would rather the animals not, be involved or hurt. They do care about the environment. If the food is, if they're not substituting something.
Right. Well, we're really at a shift in history where we actually have to start thinking about what we're eating. I mean, for most of history, man, it doesn't matter, man and animals just sort of ate whatever was around. So animals graze in the grass, they eat whatever they can find in their environment. And man did pretty much too. We ate what we could grow or what we could hunt or forage or fish, and we didn't really think about things like protein or nutrients. We just ate whatever we could find to eat. And that was good enough.
Right.
But we're at a point now where we have domesticated animals. We've created agriculture to the detriment, unfortunately, of the planet, our health, and the lives of animals. And we have to, in order to ensure our own survival on this planet, actually start thinking about what we're putting on our plates. It's absolutely, it's sort of a moral imperative at this point.
It is really surprising. Like, I've just kind of pieced together as I've talked to people that food production went through, I guess after World War II was when people started just eating what we consider to just be the terrible sort of TV dinners.
Processed foods really, and it had to do with shelf life. They had to figure out, how do you extend shelf life and make food more readily available for the growing population?
Right.
And it seemed like a good thing at one time.
Well, and apparently after the war, too, they just built up these facilities that could make lots of food for soldiers. And rather than just shut them down, they said, well, let's just create the demand side of it. Which, if you think about it, if that's how we came to eat the way we eat, doesn't seem like what you would piece together if you're trying to be healthy or save the planet or care about the animals.
Yeah, and absolutely the same thing with, for example, meat or dairy consumption. There were times, when they learned to increase milk production. Then you had a glut of milk products, and then you had to figure out how you were going to sell it. So then you create the school lunch program and make milk a necessary component of that, and make sure it's in the dietary guidelines, et cetera.
Yeah, and it sounds like I don't know if they had the food pyramid forever, which are the things you're supposed to eat, which now suspiciously looks like probably the most powerful industries were just getting their foods into the food pyramid.
Well, it was actually it wasn't the food pyramid initially. It was the 4 food groups.
Right,
if you remember that.
Yes,
it was the
food groups. That's right.
That's right. And then we had the food pyramid. Now we have My Plate. So
Yes.
it's completely evolving, and there is so much industry input into what should be on there that it's kind of frightening.
Right. So how did it come to be then that there is now a company employing all these people? Like, how did you get to this place of?
Well, first of all, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I
Yep.
can't seem to stop starting businesses, so that's one of my problems.
It's a bad habit.
It's a bad habit, yeah. But I have to say, I wasn't always good at it. So I've had businesses that have flopped on their face, and I've had businesses that have done, relatively well.
Right.
At least allowed me to make a living.
Right.
But my last food business didn't go so well. I had another food business back in the 90s where I made. Back then, we called them meat substitutes. So they were sort of the earlier versions of, we had an unsteak, an unchicken, unribs, and then the unturkey.
Yeah.
And I basically had to sell it in 2003 simply to get out of debt. At the time, veganism was just not something that people really had any interest in, and so it was a very, very limited niche audience that, bought our products. But this time around, I had written a book called Artisan Vegan Cheese. Not that we ever say that our products are artisan vegan cheeses anymore, but at the time, it seemed like this was my mission, was to show people in the world that you could actually make cheese from plant milk that was every bit as delicious as something you put on a cheese platter that you'd have on a Friday night with a glass of wine. It wasn't some synthetic, artificial, concoction made out of oils, starches, and flavors, which isn't food, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I wanted to make something that was whole foods based, using natural fermentation and some innovation to sort of capture the same unctuous quality of traditional animal dairy cheese.
Right.
So it started with a book and eventually launched into a company.
And what was it after that? How are you feeling, I guess, after that? I mean, a failing business is tough.
Yeah.
I'm used to the venture capital version where everybody goes, well, better luck next time. The version where you have debt seems pretty scary. Like, were you?
It was pretty scary. I did sell it for enough to get out of debt. But, back in the 90s, there was no money for food businesses. No one cared. Now it's hot. I mean, there's a lot of money. Everybody wants to get cash in on the plant-based trend, and there's just money being thrown at people these days. So it's a very, very different environment. Back in the 90s, people had no idea. It's like, what the hell are you doing? Why are you making this? Like, who wants this?
Right. And how did you come from that point, which I assume is a pretty low point in terms of the business side of things, to say, this is a good idea. I'm going to do this again.
Well, to be honest, I just figured I did not have the Midas touch, and that I really didn't want to start another business. I mean, I was sort of determined. Things were going well. I'd written some books that were doing well, and I had a nice life, and I'd also gotten into real estate for a while, and that was really successful.
Wow.
And so I thought, okay, I don't really need to get back into business, but I wrote this book on cheese, and people just kept bugging me. And they kept saying, why don't you just start another company? And I was like, I don't think so. Maybe in another lifetime. But eventually, I ran into an old competitor of mine when I was making meat substitutes. I ran into the CEO of Tofurkey.
Yeah.
And he said, why don't you start another company and I'll invest? And so I thought, okay, I'll give it a try. Wrote a business plan. Within 6 weeks, we raised a seed round of $1 million.
Wow.
And the rest is history.
That's incredible. And how did it grow? What did you do with that $1 million?
It was really, really small. I was dreaming really small at the time. At that time, I was thinking, okay, I'm not going to shoot for the stars because it never seems to go well. So I'm just going to learn to crawl, and then maybe I'll walk, and then I'll run. And so I rented this little facility, this little tiny space. It was an old grocery store in Fairfax, California,
Wow.
which is sort of a throwback to the 60s. And it was tiny. It was like 2,000 square feet. And I thought, I'll just open a little retail shop here and do an e-commerce business. And when I first opened, which was on a Friday afternoon, we didn't open the retail shop. I just went live online. By Monday morning, we had $50,000 in orders.
Wow.
And I thought, oh my God, maybe this actually has legs.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah.
It's amazing how many stories start out like that. I think Ben and Jerry's had an ice cream shop in Vermont, of all places, and they were experimenting, and they had a similar, I can't remember if it happened that quickly or not, but it was a similar thing where they weren't thinking of building a global ice cream conglomerate, and yet there you are.
Right. Yeah, I allowed myself after the first few months to start dreaming bigger. I thought, okay, you know what? I'm going to start thinking bigger now. And within a year, we had to look for another facility
Yeah.
because we were just, we were just crammed in there. We had our our cooler and I just showed you what our
Yeah.
cooler looked like, and our walk-in cooler, our warehouse was basically 4 shipping containers in the back.
Wow.
They were outdoors. We had this outdoor warehouse. I mean, it was a joke. A conference table was a picnic table out in the parking
Yeah.
lot. It was just absolutely absurd. We had in the office, we had, for example, oil drums and packaging boxes between tables, and you'd have to like move things around
Right.
in order to navigate to get to the other side of the room. It was just absurd.
And in contrast, now you have a huge facility. There's pallets labeled every corner of the country, if not the globe. It's really kind of incredible.
Yeah, it's grown really, really rapidly, and I think our story is very. I think it's been repeated multiple times, but I think we've been on a very fast trajectory. We've been growing between 100 and 200% annually since we started.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And how have you, like, I guess as an entrepreneur, CEO, how has that been in terms of, as somebody said once and stuck with me running companies, that the company kind of changes every 3x. So when you have 3 employees, that's different from 9.
Yes.
And then 27 is a different thing. Then 100's different. Then 300. That's kind of the.
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with, I would say it's twofold for us. One is that we have a proprietary technology that we've developed to create these cheeses because no one had ever done this before and no one knew how to do it. I mean, there was no process engineer on the planet who knew how to build our plant or how to build these lines. And so it's really been trial and error for us. And so we moved in here a little over a year ago. We had 1 line. We're building, we've added a second line, and we have 1 more line that's going in. And every time we do this, we have to figure out what's the right piece of equipment. We've had, pieces of equipment that didn't work for one thing, and we had to reapply it to another line. It's been very challenging, and our retailers, our distributors have had to be very patient with us while we figure out how to scale. So it was one thing to, make it in my kitchen and then in these small 40-pound batches, but at the old facility in Fairfax, but really going to a continuous process and really just being able to, create thousands of cases every single day is something that we've had to kind of invent and figure out. So that's been very challenging. At every step of our growth, we have to figure out, okay, how do we take it to the next level? The other thing, of course, I think every company experiences is talent. And the same people that, unfortunately, that get you started aren't necessarily the ones that, the ones that help you get to 3 million aren't the ones that can help you get to 10 million. And then the ones who get you to 25 million or 50 million or maybe, entirely different again. So we're kind of at that point where we've had to reassess our talent, hire new people,
Yep.
Retrain.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Is there any other industry that you tend to hire from? Is there something that's analogous to what you do in terms of the beer guys are perfect or anything like along those lines?
Yeah, we haven't had any beer guys. I would say people from the dairy industry have been somewhat helpful. We do have a number of people that have come from animal dairy companies,
Interesting.
other cheese companies, et cetera, because they have they understand the quality aspects in terms of food safety. That's very similar to ours. They understand fermentation because all of our products are fermented. We add traditional dairy cultures to substrates that are made from plants. And up until now, we've been using predominantly cashews, but we're introducing a new line of products this year that are made from potatoes and legumes. And they still undergo a fermentation process. And it's that fermentation process, the enzymatic action of the enzymes that we add that actually deliver all the flavor development.
Wow. And so what have retailers, like, how has that been? Everyone says breaking into retail is the hardest thing you can do. And it seems like you figured something out.
It hasn't been an issue actually for us. In fact, we have more demand than we have supply because we've grown so fast, and this has been a constant issue for us. Is that, in I'm sorry, not God, what century am I in? Last year, 2018, we had about a 70% fill rate. That meant we only filled about 70% of the orders, and we grew 168%. So unfortunately, there were a lot of retailers that were left kind of, high and dry, just didn't have enough product. They were upset. It's a real balancing act. A lot of people think, wow, that's a great problem to have, but it's really not, because you're constantly playing diplomat with all the retailers and distributors and trying to, placate them because they don't like it when their shelves are empty.
Yeah. Wow. It's such an incredible. What does the government think of what you're doing? Like, or the dairy industry?
Well,
Are
the
they
government,
unhappy? Like,
so that's really interesting. Well, first of all, the FDA has something called standards of identity, which allow you to call certain products this, that, or the other thing. And so if you want to call something either milk or cheese, then technically it's supposed to be made from the lactations of one or more healthy cows free of colostrum, which, of course, almonds don't lactate, neither do cashews.
Right.
That was a statement made by Scott Gottlieb, commissioner of the FDA. And so they're actually challenging us right now. The FDA is planning to rule on the so-called standards of identity regarding products such as milk and cheese. And when I first started, I was so afraid of the FDA that I didn't put the word cheese or butter or anything remotely close to animal dairy products on our packaging or our website. And I called it a cultured nut product.
oh boy.
Well, what is that? People don't come into stores and go, excuse me, but where is the cultured nut product? I can't find it.
Right, to go with my
no one
wine,
knows
yeah.
what it is, right?
Right.
So that is, the standards of identity were created in order to prevent confusion in the marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
But if there is no standard nomenclature for products such as ours, and every manufacturer is naming their product by a different name, it creates actually more confusion in the marketplace. There have been countless surveys done about what consumers think about words such as almond milk and whether or not they're confused by it, and overwhelmingly, no one is confused by these terms. A lot of these lawsuits that have been that are about these words have lost in superior courts. Right now, we're being sued. Actually, there's a class action lawsuit against us for using the word butter on our packaging.
Really?
Basking in the halo of butter
Oh,
and
wow.
misleading consumers.
Creative lawyer there.
Yes.
It's funny because I can imagine that initially maybe those were intended to help people. So, so when it is made out of plastic and
Right.
crap, okay, fair enough. But then it seems kind of obvious now that when people are making a product that's as good or better, that it's being used to protect
Right.
an industry.
Yeah, it is. But, it's really interesting. About 2 weeks ago, I was invited to speak at the International Dairy Foods Association in Orlando, Florida. And I gave a talk on the future of dairy in front of about 500 farmers and milk processors. And I guess it was intriguing enough that one of the industry magazines asked me for an interview. So hopefully that's coming out soon.
Wow.
But the fact of the matter is there are farmers, there are smaller producers that are threatened by the industry, and they believe that the demise of milk, which is, has the average American drinks about 100 pounds less milk annually than they did in the 1970s, and they're blaming that on the plant-based industry. But the fact is, people have been drinking less milk, eating less cheese for decades.
Yeah.
So it's really not because of that. It's because Americans are learning about a lot of other things, such as lactose intolerance and saturated fats and cholesterol and animal agriculture and its impact on the environment. And they're choosing to eat foods that are healthier for themselves and for the planet. So there are a lot of small producers that are threatened by the new industry. But there are larger producers, large multinational conglomerates, such as Danone, that has bought White Wave, makers of silk, and Nestle, which has now bought 3 plant-based companies that are investing in plant-based, that actually see that this is a solution. One of the things that I find so interesting is that the former CEO of Tyson redefined their company as a protein company.
Right.
Said, we're not a meat company because the future of meat could come from plants as well as from animals. So we're really looking at ourselves now as a protein company. And that's really the future, is that right now, the future of food is going to shift radically. It's not, whatever you can find growing around you anymore. We have to consciously decide what we're going to eat in order to save the planet. And so we're going to have to force agriculture away from animals to more crops in order to save, the 73% of all farmland. We can reduce that by just eating crops directly rather than cycling it through animals.
It's kind of incredible as the big people get in. It seems like that's when a lot of change happens. People, I mean, there's the example of like, you can do all the kind of recycling you want, and you should, but if McDonald's makes a shift in something,
Yes.
it has massive impact. Or if
Absolutely.
Walmart decides to go solar,
That's exactly right.
compared to an individual.
Yeah, and a lot of the retailers are doing that. For example, Kroger wants to be one of the leading retailers in the country for plant-based foods and natural. They want to, they want to outsell Whole Foods in that area, and they're putting massive resources into that. So, I know Target is doing the same. They've created a plant-based set in many of their stores. Our butter is sold at Target now.
Wow.
And so there is a lot of focus on this growing movement. And a lot of, retailers, I talk to them when we go to these headquarter calls, they're not just talking about following a trend, they're also getting the whole mission behind it.
So how quickly do you think, I've had a sense there's kind of been vegans and people eating this way for a long time. It just feels like it feels like it's going quickly now.
Oh my gosh, yes.
You see
exponentially.
the things in the stores and then Whole Foods,
Yep.
but in restaurants, like it seems like something's like that it's coming pretty quick all of a sudden.
Yes, I think I would say, compared to 10 years ago, I think there's been so much change in the last 5 years. I think according to Google, the word vegan is one of the top 10 most searched words.
Interesting.
Yes.
Very
So,
interesting. So what was it like? So venture capitalists are interested, and all of a sudden how did you come? I think Obvious is one of your
Obvious is
your
one
investors.
of ours, yes, and JMK, which is a PE firm that was started by one of the TSG guys.
Oh wow! And how did they?
Yeah.
How did that happen? Was that part of your first business with the whole venture type?
No, I had no investors before, really, except for
Wow.
just friends and family.
So how did it come about?
Well, when I first started in 2014, and I think I told you in January of that year, we closed $1 million in 6 weeks, and mostly friends and family, and then Seth Tibbett of Tofurkey. But one person, I think Seth talked to someone at the Humane Society of the United States, and they ended up investing in us. They had a
Wow.
fund to support plant-based businesses as a way to sort of stop any animal agriculture, and then they knew somebody else who was investing. Someone on their board had a fund called Stray Dog Capital, which is another fund that invests only in plant-based. And so it was like someone knew someone. And now I'm literally hit up. I get several inquiries every week from, "Hi, we're really been following you for a while. Been seeing seeing how well you're performing." And they look at the data, they look at market research, and they're like, we've been watching your growth, and we're really interested. So now it's just, we've got a very, very long list of interested parties. We just closed an internal round recently of $11 million. It just kind of came together. We're going to be doing a Series C in 2019 towards the end. And we were just going to do a bridge note sort of to just get us until then. And one of our investors said, why don't we just do a quick internal round? And we think you're going to need this cash, and we can get it done in a matter of a few weeks. So it was done all internally at a fair valuation. And now we're kind of helping us build the team that I mentioned that we need to build.
It's incredible.
Hiring top talent,
Right.
and then that will situate us for a very sizable Series C that will really be about just innovation, marketing, and sales.
And how has the experience been with your venture capitalists? Do they say carry on and have fun, let us know, or are they trying to give you ideas every other day of the week?
Well, they do give us ideas, and I would say they're good ones.
Really?
I think in the beginning, as an entrepreneur working with VCs for the first time, I was a little intimidated by them. I thought, oh my God, they're going to kick me out, and I'm not going to be there anymore.
It's happened.
Capitalists. Initially, I was really intimidated by them. I didn't know what was going to happen with them, and they've actually become great partners. They believe in us, which is really great. They believe in what we're doing. All the advice they've given us actually has been really fantastic. I would say we're very close. We talk on a regular basis. We make a lot of decisions together. I don't know if they're just different from other venture capitalists, but they really believe in our mission. They really believe in what we're trying to accomplish. And, occasionally they'll say, well, we don't think that's a great idea. But for the most part, they believe in me and the team that we're building 100%.
And what is the big future as a company? Is it, hey, this thing's big enough, it'll go public, or nope, we're just going to keep it growing, or what is the big idea?
Oh, yeah, we just want to be, we really do believe that in order to have as much impact as possible, you got to be as big as possible. And we really are not just about selling cheese. We're really about changing the world and the future of food. I mean, that's what we're here for. That's what, that's why I did this. So we're trying to grow as fast as we can, get into as many places as possible, get into food service. We're trying to build the biggest brand we possibly can, be the category captain, and just take over the whole dairy set. I mean, that's really what we're trying to do, is replace animal products
in the dairy sector.
In the dairy sector.
And then the meat guys are a different group of guys.
That's a different guys.
Yeah.
We're taking over the dairy set, and we want to drive that whole conversion.
Right. Wow, it's just incredible. I wanted to ask about what do you worry about the most? Like, what's the thing that would knock you off your game? Is there a big competitor that's a problem, or is there a government? I would hope wouldn't be the problem, but
I'm kind of the government regulation issue is just something that I don't really worry about too much. I feel like we need to be bold, and we're shouting it from the rooftops that we're a cheese company that's made from plants. We're trying to redefine what dairy products are. We're trying to redefine dairy products as not just coming from animals, but from plants as well. We don't consider ourselves a dairy alternative. We don't consider ourselves dairy-free or non-dairy. We consider ourselves dairy made from plants. So that's the conversation we're trying to bring, because we believe that animal dairy products are not sustainable, and they're not going to be around for too much longer. So why would we want to call ourselves an alternative? So I don't really stay up late at night worrying about regulation or anything. I'm just going to fight it as hard as I can. What keeps me up at night really are operations, because this is so new. What we're doing is so new and so challenging, and we are working through it. I do see light at the end of the tunnel. I would say our manufacturing capabilities increase daily, but it's been such a stormy ride, to be honest, and that's really...
But what a great barrier to entry, too, at some point. I mean,
yes.
Even if someone else comes up with a product, you're like, yeah, well... Now you've got a few years of
that's exactly
figuring
right.
out how to get
that's exactly
moving
right.
around the world.
Yes.
Where did it all start? Like, what was your first job, and how did you?
Oh, my first job
begin.
Gosh, my first job had nothing to do with food. But back in the 1980s, I was living in Japan. I went vegan. Yeah. I was already a vegetarian, but
And why at the time? Like, what was I'm most curious what people's reasons are.
It was really just because I had stomach problems all the time, and I don't know. I thought, God, maybe it's the dairy, and I gave it up. And I don't know, I must have read something about dairy allergies or something, and I gave it up, and my stomach was fine after that. And so,
that's great.
It was just for health reasons. Yeah. So that meant that I would cheat occasionally. I'd have some pizza or something. Yeah. But I really, really liked French pastries and cheese and butter and everything that was rich and just rich and creamy. And so I started my first business, which was a little pound cake business. It was a bakery. I rented this funky little bakery, and I had no car in Tokyo, but I did have a big backpack. So I would put 70 pounds of pound cake. They're a pound each, so 70 of them. And I would take the subway, and I would deliver them to these little, little stores and things.
That's amazing. So you really are an entrepreneur.
I just did it. And I remember doing it, like sweating in this hot, bakery on the third floor.
Yeah, Tokyo can get
in Tokyo.
miserable.
It was just humid and awful, and the ovens would be going, and I'd be miserable. And I'd go, oh my God, why didn't I go into fashion or something?
And now here you are.
And here I am, yeah.
There's one more thing I wanted to ask you about in reading up about you, that you're involved with an animal sanctuary. Is this right?
That's right.
This seems fascinating to me. It seems amazing.
It is amazing. My husband and I moved out to Nicasio, which is in West Marin, about 3.5 years ago. And after we moved there, we had 17 acres. Someone asked us if we could take these 2 rescue goats because there was a barn, and we kind of did. And then next thing you knew, somebody asked us to take some pigs, and then it was another goat and a sheep, and then it was a cow, and now we have a 501c3 nonprofit animal sanctuary called Rancho Compasión. Wow. That's like compassion with one S, and we have about 70 animals: pigs, donkeys, sheep, geese, ducks, turkeys, chickens.
That is incredible.
You name it, and it's just wonderful. We have volunteers, visitation day, educational programs for schools.
And do you get to spend any time with the animals?
Oh, every morning I am shoveling manure and feeding the animals. That's how I start my day.
That is incredible.
And sometimes I come to work and someone will say, "Let me just pick that straw out of your hair."
Wow. It's the glamorous life of a CEO. Yeah. Fantastic. Well, this has been great. I really appreciate this.
Well, thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. This has been the Something About Your podcast. See you next time. Thanks
For having me on.